Michelle Lomax. Welcome.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou. My submission relates to social housing provision for people with chronic mental illness. So I'll take the submission as read, just to reiterate that I urge the Council to recognise that people living with chronic mental illness should be a priority group for social housing, that the Council should increase its number of social houses to accommodate this, and that the Council should provide some funding for social housing from rates. To give you a bit of context about what prompted me to make this submission, I support a family member with chronic mental illness, and she recently had trouble with her landlord. This is in Dunedin, and we're a well-resourced family. She's got a lot more support than a lot of people who live with chronic mental illness, and she was able to have her fixed-term tenancy finished and so on, but it did lead to a 6-week hospital admission in Dunedin, and it got me reflecting on what it was like for the people that don't have the level of resources and the level of support that my daughter has. So that was the context for the submission. So just to repeat, I'm going to be very brief here, which is that people living with chronic mental illness have significant challenges in relation to housing, and they can be quite different really, although they are part of that group of people with disabilities. In fact, they have quite a unique set of challenges. If the Council wants to ensure that the most disadvantaged people in our community do receive social housing, they do need to be making that group a priority, I believe. And stable, healthy housing is critical to ensuring that people with chronic mental illness do have the best life possible, given the challenging set of circumstances that they live in. And I've got one more thing I'd like to add, which is that I would like to support the KAD, Christchurch submission, which calls for a special rate on off-licence premises to help fund services for alcohol and drug addiction. So I'm happy to take questions if you have any.
Yeah. Phil and Glenn.
Thanks very much, Michelle. I think in your fuller statement you refer to the care agencies in terms of helping people with chronic long-term mental illness as time limited. I just wonder if you might elaborate on what you mean by that.
So in terms of Canterbury, I'm a bit less familiar because I am an elected member of the West Coast District Health Board at this point, and our residential services there are for 2 years, and I'm assuming that it's a similar thing here potentially, but also there's always an undersupply of those kind of services anyway for supported accommodation type stuff, which is what's provided in the health sector.
Yeah. Thanks, Michelle. I've got one other question too. And you refer to the Housing First program,
yes,
which you seem to support, and in terms, especially say for people who have a long-term or chronic mental illness. So I'm just wondering, in fact, our council would have some funding available right now, actually within this budget, if we wanted to be a partner with government around the Housing First program. So I'm just wondering if you would agree that, or think that our council should be part of that partnership via funding support too.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, from my point of view, I'm concerned about the outcomes and however they can be achieved. I do think though that if the council is going to provide a social housing program, that it is appropriate to be ensuring that it is targeted at most in need, and I believe that no matter what your other set of disadvantages are, if you've also got on top of that chronic mental illness, then boom, you are very, very disadvantaged.
Thank you.
Glenn?
Thank you, Michelle. There seems to be up till now, council social housing hasn't been funded by ratepayers, but by rent payers. You get the feeling this is like some kind of sacred cow that has to be kicked to be broken through. What's your perception around that? I mean, is that a perception / reality? How prevalent is that, do you think?
I mean, I don't have an in-depth knowledge, although I have, as I understand it, Christchurch, did you start providing social housing? It was in the 1930s, yep. and I don't know whether it ever has been funded out of rates previously, but I think
No, we had government funding right from the
Back from the
get-go,
30s.
state advances or housing, whatever it was, yeah.
Has there ever been ratepayer support for council housing?
Well, only that it's capital tied up, that's all, but no.
Right. I mean, I think given particularly the social conditions that we find ourselves in now with increasing poverty, homelessness and so on, I think that it is appropriate that ratepayers would be making a contribution to social housing.
We've developed we've reached the end of the 5 minutes. We have developed the Otatahi Community Housing Trust, and what I like about that model is that it brings other providers and social service agencies to the governance, and that's a model that seems to be working quite well. So, but thank you very much for your submission. Very powerful personal story, so thank you for coming.